such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is about murder inside of a high security apartment, proving that nowhere is safe. Now, in a place where a woman felt she could finally be safe, all of that was ripped away in one night while she was asleep. I also want to thank today's sponsor, which is Best Fiends. It's best friends without the R. And if you guys have watched my channel, you know that I have promoted them before, and I have just been playing this nonstop. So that when they reached back out, I was like, I definitely want to do another sponsorship. If you don't know, Best Fiends is like a puzzle adventure game where you can collect these little Best Fiend creatures as you go. And there's so many levels that allows you to feel almost like satisfied and accomplished once you get up to the higher levels. It's really awesome to be a game that you can play for hours and never get bored. So if you want to play, you could actually download it for free with the link down below, and that will also give you a $5 worth of gold for free if you can beat level 5. So if you think you can do it, go down below, click that link and download it for free, and let me know what level you are on. And if you don't know, it's my absolute passion to tell these stories. I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if you would like to support me in doing that, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2015 in Florida, and Sasha Samsudin lived in Orlando. She was a 27-year-old who had just graduated from the University of Florida to get her degree, and after that she went on to actually be extremely successful in her own career. You see, she had landed a job with a real estate and apartment company where she would be doing all of the work for their social media. So she would actually be creating the videos and the photos for marketing purposes for their brand.
Hi, I'm Sasha from 407apartments.com, and I am this year's Education Committee Chair. Thank you so much for attending today's class.
Her official title was Social Media Manager, which is something I feel like a lot of us know about, and she absolutely loved this. She was ecstatic for this opportunity. It was said to be her dream job, and she did so well at it. On camera, Sasha was a natural, and she was known in real life to be this bubbly, smiley, happy all the time kind of girl, and it was just the same with her job.
Hey guys, I'm Sasha from 407apartments.com, and I'm also this year's AAGO Education Chair. I'd like to invite all of you guys out to Lisapalooza, an event that's being held on September 27th at the Plaza Live on Bumby Avenue in downtown Orlando. I've attended the past 2 years of Lisapalooza, and let me tell you, it's a great event. As a supplier, even on this side of the industry, I get to spend an entire day with my clients learning about their side of the business. What could be better than that?
At this time, she was also volunteering her time that she didn't really have much of to an education company where they would help teachers and students have services provided to them. It was something she was passionate about, so she spent her free time doing that. But with all of that, she finally decided that it was time to move on her own. And so she decided to move into this luxury apartment that she could afford during this time. It was high-end and it was downtown, called Uptown Apartments. It was such an amazing complex that they actually had security to keep the residents safe. They also had updated their lock system to this Quickie set locks that were known to be harder to get into, and they basically had a digital deadbolt. So it was kind of hacker proof, or it was marketed to be. Being independent was a dream for Sasha, and this was mainly because she didn't really have to worry about other people, waking them up if she was out too late or wanted to get up early. And Sasha loved to party. She loved to be with her friends, and she loved to be out on the weekends. She would dress up, but that wasn't just on the weekends. That was actually every day. She was kind of one to always look fancy, even if everybody else was wearing sweats. That was just her. And on October 16th of 2015, she was all dressed up and ready to go. She had a full weekend planned. She had started going to a soccer game to watch with some of her friends, and the social Sasha decided that after they won that she was going to go out to celebrate that win with some of her friends and go drinking at some clubs. They started at the Attic nightclub and they were all having such a good time. And then the next morning, they believed that Sasha was missing. She had planned to see her friend Anthony for breakfast and she never showed up. He started texting her, messaging her on social media, and she wasn't answering anything. And he thought, well, maybe it's just that she was hungover from the night before, she slept in, and it's not really that big of a deal that she missed the breakfast. So he just kind of let it go. Anthony was one of the people who was actually out with Sasha the night before. He had seen her leave at around 12:30 a.m. because she just, was done basically going out and she had already had a lot to drink. And so she said she was going to leave. Anthony didn't know if that was to another bar or to her house. He said that they often separated and they would meet up later on. So he was used to her kind of leaving and going on her own. And he said that he thought that they would just see each other later, and then he never saw her, so he thought maybe she did go home. He began asking if any of the rest of her friends saw her later that night or had heard from her that next morning, and they hadn't seen or heard from her at all. But they all figured, like him, that she was hungover and that she just needed some time to revive herself. A few hours later, though, when she still wasn't answering anybody or posting on social media, a few of them did head to the Uptown Apartments just to knock on her door, wake her up, and make sure she was okay. They actually wanted to make sure she was going to make it to a baby shower she had later that day. She had already bought a present and she was really wanting to go. So they didn't want her to miss this just because she overslept. So they were trying to be good friends. They went actually to her car that was in the parking garage and they found that there was a gift in there that appeared to be the baby shower gift. So they were like, okay, well, her car is here. The baby shower gift is here. Obviously, she must be here as well. Nothing else was amiss inside or outside the car, so they went to her apartment door, and once they were knocking on the door, they didn't get an answer. So they began calling hospitals and jails, thinking maybe because she was drinking, she got into a little bit of trouble. But nobody was saying that she was in their care, and no amount of banging would wake her up. Anthony then called police and told the officers that his friend Sasha was missing. They arrived shortly after and were assisted by the security guard on duty to help them kind of figure out where she could have been, how to get in this apartment. Because the thing was, the security guards didn't have access to get inside to these very high security locks, and so they would have to go up higher on the chain to get into an apartment. When they finally did, though, the officers told the friends to stay outside while they went in and searched. So they started looking in, and nothing really seemed like there was a fight. They didn't even think Sasha was there until they made it to the bedroom. And that is when they looked in, didn't immediately see anything, but then saw an arm and some hair sticking out from the comforter. There was a wrapped up comforter on the bed, and upon unfolding it, they found Sasha. Her shirt and her bra were ripped open. Her necklace was kind of off and tangled in her hair, and she had even deeper marks on her neck. Her body was taken in for an autopsy while the detectives searched further, and her friends were kind of ushered off the premises. And that is when they found that there was actually no signs of forced entry, even though this was a very high security lock. There wasn't a struggle. And it appeared as though this murder either hadn't happened there, or it was some surprise attack, or she had kind of let this person in before it happened. There was also an overwhelming smell in the apartment that nobody wanted to mention until they had to, because they came across a cabinet in the bathroom that was open, full of cleaning supplies, and that's when they all discussed, saying, yeah, it does smell like somebody cleaned up the entire crime scene. This was devastating because they believed it meant they would find no evidence and it would be extremely hard to find a killer. Officers soon realized that nowhere inside of this apartment was Sasha's purse that she was last seen in, or her phone, or her key fob for the apartment. Now, although it was believed that this crime scene had been thoroughly cleaned, crime scene investigators were still there looking for any hope, for any clue that they could find. They were doing their job and going to work regardless. And without them, the fingerprints would have never been found, because they noticed that the toilet seat was up. Now, this was strange for a single woman living in this apartment who didn't have a boyfriend. So they actually dusted for fingerprints, and that's when they found 2 on the bottom of the toilet. There was also a shoe print as well as a condom wrapper next to her bed and fingerprints on the bed sheets and the nightstand. While this was all sent in to be tested, officers were asking where they could get the footage for the surveillance cameras. They had noticed about 15 in the area around the apartments, and they believed that this could have caught her killer. However, in yet another setback, the apartment complex said that this would actually take a while because the footage was held off-site. Sasha's cause of death was officially ruled as strangulation, but thankfully, the killer had been just as incompetent of cleaning her body as he was cleaning the apartment, because DNA was also found on her. Yet when they put this into the database, no matches were found. The first suspects were automatically her previous boyfriends due to this being what appeared to be a crime of passion, so angry, so forceful. And so they began looking into people who could have wanted her dead. This led them to a man named Ben. He was actually the last one she was thought to be in contact with. She texted him at about 5:12 a.m., which was said to be right before she was murdered, and all the text said was his name, Ben. Sasha's friends were questioned, and they said that Sasha and Ben were actually supposed to hang out that weekend, and it didn't happen, and they had dated prior to this, but weren't dating at that time. There was also another previous boyfriend that was named Taylor. So both of these men were located, and Ben said that he was at his friend's house that entire night and had not seen Sasha at all. Ben was more than willing to give DNA, and so was Taylor. Taylor was a bartender who worked until 9:30 p.m. that Friday night, and he said that Sasha and him talked, but they never actually dated. Both samples of this DNA was not a match, and so they were back to the drawing board once again, and that's when investigators realized that Sasha could have walked home. This was about 10 blocks from the Attic nightclub to her apartment, and that meant that there were so many more security cameras that they could possibly get the footage of sooner than they were going to be able to get the footage from the apartments. And so they began trying to get all of the footage all the way up the street back to the Attic nightclub, and while officers combed through that footage, others went to look for possible witnesses who had seen her. Thankfully, they soon enough found possible witnesses on the footage because it showed the nightclub and it showed that Sasha walked out. She was kind of stumbling a little bit. She was wearing white pants and a purple shirt. And that is when she started randomly running. Now, there was about 6 seconds of footage that was unaccounted for, kind of glitched out, and then suddenly Sasha is walking once again, and she's with 2 different women. That's when investigators knew they had something. So they needed to identify these 2 women who her friends said they had no idea who they were. Their photos were sent out to the public, and they were asking for these women to come forward and say what they saw that night. And thankfully, they were more than willing to. They claimed that they were helping this drunk girl because men kept trying to talk to her, seeing that she was so intoxicated. They began getting scared for her that something was going to happen, and so they actually offered to split an Uber ride home with her. She didn't have her ID or her cell phone, and she would have had to walk those 10 blocks alone at night. Yet they said that they actually dropped Sasha off at her apartment building, and she didn't have any way to confirm that she lived there, and she couldn't locate her key fob, and so the security would not let her inside, even though they said that they actually knew her and had seen her around before. They claimed, though, that a little while later, the 2 girls were talking to the security guard when Sasha actually slipped in with another resident who knew who she was and let her in with him. The security on site were then questioned about who was, working that night, and it was found that the security guard on duty was the same security guard that they first talked to when she was found and who had helped them kind of get into her apartment. And the security guard was named Steven, and he was brought in to be questioned. He claimed that he did see Sasha that night. She arrived home around 1 a.m., but she was too drunk to remember her code. She didn't have any identification, and he could not let her in. He said that she eventually did get in, and he kind of did just go back to work after that because residents had let her in, and most of the residents wouldn't let in anybody that they actually didn't know lived there. So he figured that if they let her in, then it was fine. And then a little while later, around 3 a.m., he noticed her walking kind of around the apartments, and that is when she asked him to walk her to her car. She said that she believed that she could find her keys or remember the code. She had something in there that would help her, and so he did follow her there to make sure she was safe. And then when they were about to get there, she actually said that she remembered the code, and so they were headed back. As they were walking back to the door, Steven said Sasha was kind of putting in the code once again. He had to go back to work, and so he said that's the last time he really saw her that night. He figured she went into her apartment and that was it. And then finally, the surveillance footage from the actual apartments came in. And they found that at 1:46 a.m., Sasha was seen on footage going to her apartment, and then a man began talking to her. Now, on this footage, she actually moves along, and this man is never seen again with her, and the man was located quickly due to possibly being the last person to see Sasha, and he said basically he could see how drunk she was, so he asked her if she was okay. She said yes, and then they parted. Then at 2:06 a.m., she is seen making a lot of noise in the hallways with her shoes while she was running. And then at 2:25 a.m., Sasha is with the security guard, Steven, who was sweeping the hallways during this time. And they ended up going to the garage to look for her car. Everything checked out. It was just as the security guard said. And so they didn't know what really happened between that time and her being found murdered. No one knew how exactly someone could get into this high security building and into the locked apartment of this sleeping girl who thought she was safe. But exactly a week later, the next Friday at around 10:30 a.m., a man was arrested in connection to the murder. This man had no prior criminal history, but he was being held in jail, and during a press conference, the Orlando police officers claimed to have a video of this man walking out of the apartment with garbage bags. These were the same garbage bags that Sasha had in her apartment, and they believed that they were the killer. This man was 35-year-old Steven Duxbury, and he was a security guard. Security guards were not meant to be taking out any trash. This was not part of their duties, and they believed he used his access to prey on a vulnerable woman. The surveillance footage showed Steven taking out the bags, then going to the parking garage to his own vehicle, and then returning to the building. He actually left the apartment about 40 minutes after he was supposed to leave when his shift ended. Steven's supervisors had told investigators that he had come in crying, saying that he was the last person to see her alive. Now, Steven was brought in for questioning before this, but he was told he was just a witness, he was not under arrest, and he was also given a polygraph test. Now, Steven said that he was, just doing his duties, and he took his duties as a security guard very seriously. He was even given a raise when he was about to quit, so he had, a lot of reasons to stay there. He had also been given the opportunity to even have this job by a professor he had at the moment at his college who taught criminal justice. Steven said that he wanted to work in cybersecurity, said computers were his thing, and he was just kind of doing this security job as like a stepping stone. When he was taking the polygraph test, he was asked if he entered Sasha's apartment that night, and he said no. He said he was not supposed to go inside the apartments. The polygraph showed that this was a lie. Then he was asked where he got the garbage bags from, and he said he found them randomly in the hallway and thought that he might as well just take them out since he was there. This polygraph showed that this was a lie once again. The needle also jumped when he was asked if Sasha was strangled. They went through a whole bunch of things. Was she hit? Was she shot? And the needle jumped at was she strangled, even though the public had not been told this information yet. He was asked if he had a normal heart rate normally, and he said, why? Is it high? And it was. After being asked questions like was she hit with a chair, was she shot, Steven randomly said that he could see in his imagination all of those things happening to her, and he was almost distraught about it. In the 3 hours of interrogation footage I found, Stephen was very much calm during this interrogation at the beginning, and he was even joking with investigators. He began talking about how stressed he was and the fact that his stepsister died a few years ago. He was also in the Air Force from 2008 to 2014 and had been honorably discharged. He said that he had sleeping problems that caused him to be late all the time. He had also been diagnosed with anxiety disorder, and he had a wife that he had recently married and who was trying to buy a house with him during this time. When they got to his juvenile days, he did not want to discuss his record. He said that he was falsely accused and that it was all a huge misunderstanding.
Ever been arrested? Yes, juvenile. Juvenile, okay. And what was that for? That was, do I have to discuss my juvenile record? No, we don't. Okay. Well, I'll just put it as juvenile. It's a really jacked up situation that happened. You guys understand. We all have life experiences. We all done stupid shit when we were young. Yeah. And we've grown from those. You're not actively still doing the same silly stuff. So
he then finally admitted that when he was younger, he had accidentally hit his best friend's older sister over the head.
My best friend's older sister was babysitting my siblings because they wouldn't listen to me. My mother was a single mother raising 4 kids. We lived in a farm, and this is Massachusetts. Kid that lived down the road kept sneaking over to our farm and opening all the doors, letting our animals out in the middle of the night. We lived on a major highway. Well, I had to take the dogs out to the barn. She came with me to help me because I had a golden retriever and another dog. It's a chocolate lab. And while we were out there, I'd forgotten to plug in the cord that gave power to the barn in the house, so it was pitch black, and I thought I heard something upstairs. And I thought, oh, God, shit's upstairs. So, not really thinking, I went over to the wall of tools, and I grabbed the first thing that seemed sense to me, which was a shovel head that had broken off the staff. I go up the stairs, and she's following me. She was about a year or 2 older than I was, and, she's kind of a little nervous about what's going on, so I'm like, hey, stay here at the top of the stairs. If anyone tries to run by you, stop. She's like, okay. So I go walking around, but I can barely see anything because, the moonlight, not really turning around. Upside the back of her head. Oh, she had moved and followed me. I didn't know. Okay, that's a simple mistake. Yeah, well, that simple mistake, unfortunately, went right down the worst roads possible. She freaks out. And I find out later that's because she had been raped by her 3 previous boyfriends and her uncle. So she had some severe issues with that. Her mother hated my mother because her kids felt more comfortable talking to my mother than her. So she forced Becky to press charges against me. State troopers in the area basically assumed I was trying to rape her or something.
After the family pressed charges against him, Stephen actually pled guilty to reckless assault, and then his entire family moved away. He said it was all this huge misunderstanding that he decided not to fight because he didn't want to put his best friend's family through it, but he was distraught because they were saying that he knocked her out because he wanted to sexually assault her. He then said that his uncle had sexually assaulted him when he was 9 years old. When talking about Sasha, he said he could tell she was very intoxicated, but he said that after he helped her, he believed she was already inside her apartment, but then he had seen her out again with another man. And by the end of this whole interrogation and polygraph, he was more concerned about getting to take a nap before work than possibly being implicated in a murder. Stephen was then photographed, and that's when they saw what they believed to be scratches and bite marks on his forearms. They believed that these were possible defense wounds of Sasha, and I'm not sure if they even brought it up to him or asked him why he had them, because I could not find anything of him trying to come up with excuses or anything like that. But due to polygraphs being admissible in court, investigators knew that they needed more evidence. So they wanted the shoes that Stephen was wearing the night that he was being the security guard, because they had found that footprint in her bedroom. Now he gave them the shoes and they tested them, and this actually didn't match the shoe prints, but they believed he was not giving them the correct shoes. That's when they got a search warrant for his home. They went in and they found it a complete mess. So after scavenging through the mess that was his apartment, they found shoes with matching shoe prints. But inside Stephen's phone was the most disturbing evidence of all. You see, Stephen had been employed by this Vital Security and Investigations. He had gone through this 40-hour training program, and he had been working at this apartment complex for about 5 months, doing 4 days a week. But around 5 a.m. the morning of the murder, his phone search results showed that he had been searching how to override security locks. An hour later, he's seen on camera carrying trash bags. No one could say how he actually got into this apartment, but he did search how many times. And between both phones being searched, Sasha's and his, they found that they had never communicated prior. It's not like Sasha would ever have invited him inside her home. Then Stephen was tested against the fingerprints found under the toilet seat, and this was a match. They had their killer. And while awaiting trial, Stephen tried to fight for evidence to be excluded. He wanted the polygraph test statements as well as the shoes that matched the shoe print all to be taken out of the trial. And that's when other residents of this apartment complex came forward to say that they had complained about Stephen before and his sketchy behavior. They were creeped out by him. And another female had actually said he followed her back to her apartment and nothing was done about this. They didn't fire him. They didn't do anything. During the trial, medical examiner Dr. Gary Utz explained that Sasha's murder was one of the most brutal he had ever seen. She had been manually strangled and she had suffered a painful murder. He had never seen an internal neck fracture so severe, and there were actually cleaning products poured on and into Sasha's body to destroy evidence and hide potential injuries. But defense attorneys began questioning Dr. Utz and asked if he had found any sign of a struggle on her body, and he said no. The female witnesses who had brought Sasha back to her apartment that night had more to say on the stand, and they claimed that they had met Stephen right outside of the apartment, and he had told him that this wasn't the first time he had seen Sasha around, and they said that when Sasha snuck in with this other resident, he stayed outside with them and they thanked him for his help even though he had not done anything. They were just trying to be nice. Defense attorneys then brought in their own witnesses who were Sasha's previous boyfriends. They began asking if Sasha was sexually aggressive in their relationships. And then a completely different boyfriend than the ones questioned as suspects, his name was Joshua Cohen, said that she was sexually aggressive and that she was kinky and into choking. The defense then brought back the female witnesses and asked them if they had really said that Sasha had given the Uber driver a big kiss on the cheek. That's when they said, yeah, she gave them a kiss, but it was not really big. The whole courtroom got the picture that the defense was trying to say that Sasha's murder was due to rough, consensual sex with someone she trusted or someone she allowed in her apartment, and possibly someone who wasn't Stephen. They even tried to say the apartment lighting was mood lighting. That's when the prosecution brought officers who were at the crime scene who found Sasha to the stand, and that is when Officer Medvez said that he could tell that Stephen was nervous when he was there, and he just kind of began hovering over them and stood there staring at them. Now, 2 years after the murder, Stephen was sentenced to 2 life sentences for murder and sexual assault and additional 15 years for burglary. Sasha's mother, Tara, said, "Sasha said I love you, and I said I love you more. Sasha said I love you to infinity. I said to her I love you infinity times infinity to the infinity power." Sasha's family had actually begun to try to help other families who were victims to homicide, and her parents, Tara and Ken, actually ended up suing the apartments and the people who made the lock on her door for allowing it to be cracked by searching on the internet. They claimed that the company should have done more extensive background check to hire this man, and that the locks used were actually known to be risky because articles had been written about that exact thing 2 years prior and nobody listened or did anything about it. A Wired article had claimed that these Millions of locks were vulnerable to hackers using only a screwdriver and a wire. In fact, 2 lock hackers named Mark Tobias and Toby Bluzmanis demonstrated at a hacker conference that they could get into these unhackable locks with simple instruments in 6 different ways. They could even use a piece of blank to put in the keyboy and then use a hammer to punch out the cap. Basically, it was very easy, and then a wire was inserted with a looped end to turn the tailpiece, and they could pretend that they had a key without actually having the key. It took them 30 seconds to do, and then afterwards there was no trace of it being broken into at all. And another method actually took 15 seconds with a screwdriver and a wrench, and they were able to get inside. They said this, the company knew this, and this was not corrected. In fact, when the men told the company about this, they said there's no way that could be true because screwdrivers won't even fit in the keyway. The vice president of these locks said that they stood behind the security, they put their customer safety first, and were dedicated to do a complete investigation on this matter. The family's lawyer, so Sasha's family's lawyer, said they were aware of their defect and they could have said something to police, but naturally they wouldn't want to say, hey, just so you know, that design, we know millions of those are broken into, so you might want to save that for your case. A year after the murder, the digital deadbolt that was used at this apartment was redesigned mysteriously, even though they denied any vulnerabilities. Tara and Ken continue to tell Sasha's story, and they walk other families through the process of dealing and grieving with a loved one's death.
Someone to guide you through the system.
For Tara Samsudeen, she struggled to work as a trauma nurse after the death of her daughter. Instead, she's helping people like those at this annual Victims' Rights Breakfast.
We help ourselves by telling our stories, but we also help them by listening to their stories.
And Sasha's brother Kenny actually started hiking for her, and he would wear a red necktie with his normal hiking gear because he knew that Sasha loved to dress up. Her favorite color was also red. And so every Friday, as well as the hiking, every Friday he and friends would post on social media wearing their best outfits with the hashtag Fancy for Sasha. The whole family also joined a group called Bereaved Survivors of Homicide to make them feel less alone. They have done a wonderful job at staying strong, but still staying sensitive and positive in this horrific tragedy. What do you think it will take for women to be safe in places that they have made sure they're safe in? I could not find whether the family of Sasha was able to get any money out of the lock company, but I truly hope that they did, and I hope that this was dealt with on a bigger scale and that there will be many repercussions for these locks, because if a man, no matter if he was in cybersecurity, no matter if he was good with the computers, if anybody can get into a lock system with Google, then that is hackable locks. And for them to deny it and continually see this happening and not do anything about it, that is negligence on their part. And that is horrific that they would let so many people have this false sense of security. I think this case, like many others, many tried to blame it on the fact that she was out partying, that she was intoxicated, that she was alone. Those things should not matter. This woman, every man, no matter what you identify as, should feel safe no matter what. And it's horrible to think that we have to be so on guard that we can't have fun, that we can't do anything without looking over our shoulder to make sure we're okay. I'm sure just like Sasha, a lot of us kind of do look at what we have in place for security and we think, that's enough, right? And I don't want to scare you, but I just want you to always kind of have that sense of what more can I do? How can I further protect myself? And even though that shouldn't be on us, it should be on the monsters of the world to not look at vulnerable people as prey. I am sorry, and the world should be sorry that you're in a position where you have to be so vigilant, so paranoid, but it can also save your life. In no way am I blaming Sasha for what happened, because it's in no way her fault. For having fun, for being a young woman who wanted to go out and have a good time, a young woman who loved what she was doing for the world. So please be safe out there, guys. No matter what you're doing, just let yourself have fun, but also make sure that there's always that person with you that will have your back, because this world doesn't. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.